Hey, everybody, and welcome to the 46th week of the Free Assange Vigil. My name is Andrew Smith, and I am joined with my co-host Steve Poikinen. Today is day 3,455 since the illegal and arbitrary detention of Julian Assange started. It is 408 days since he was trafficked out of the Ecuadorian embassy to Belmarsh prison following a $4.2 billion international monetary loan fund to the nation of Ecuador. It is 107 days until the start of the second round of Julian Assange's extradition hearing in September. It is 1,085 days since the incarceration of reality winner, and some good news, it is 71 days since Chelsea Manning has gone free. Um, with that, how are you doing today, Steve?
The unmute button. I'm doing pretty good, man. I'm half dead, actually. I'm walking wounded and completely out of sorts. But other than that, I'm damn near perfect. We'll run with that as I drop things. Yeah, let's. We were supposed to be joined by Alex from Red Star Radio. We apparently had a communication gap, so I think it's just me and you today. I would like to point to the teach-in video that we released yesterday. If you have not seen that, and if you're not aware, we're doing a series of these teach-ins. We're hoping to get them out about every 10 to 14 days. The first one dropped yesterday. It's up on my page, Action for Assange, I believe Unity for Jay. If you can, these are meant for people who aren't necessarily on board already. So if there are people in your lives who don't exactly know the situation surrounding Julian Assange, please share this with them. It is muy importante. Also, because we're, trying to get our narrow behinds to DC, we do have a GoFundMe up. I will make sure the links get posted into the chats going. If you can, please donate. If you can't, totally understand, but please get that link out there. We're trying to be there for all 3 weeks of the trial, and that's going to be a substantial hurdle to get over, but we have every amount of confidence that we can achieve it. We just need your help. So having said that, let me get the links in there, and you look like you're ready to say something, Andre.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the GoFundMe and what we have planned for this September. For those who don't know, Julian's trial got rescheduled for the beginning of September. And what we would like to see happen and what we're hoping to build towards is getting larger events happening that are designed to create more of an impact, but still allow people to understand what is going on. So one of the first big things that we're going to try to get done, which we need help from other content creators and other journalists and activists and different organizations, is basically what we're going to call Guantanamo Bay Day. Which, no? Okay. So Steve says no, so I'm going to hold off on that one. But what I will do,
I don't want you to give away the whole store.
Okay, that's fine.
Man, I don't.
That's fine.
There's more than one Kevin watching right now. They already know too much.
So what I'll do instead is in the chat, I'm going to drop the link for the actions for this week, because every week we've been putting out different actions for everybody to take. This week this month in general, we're taking a specific look at trying to engage with organized labor, since this is, May Day, May 1st, Labor Day. If you could hop in there, share that link out, but also take those actions that are in there, because they're super simple. It'll only take a couple minutes and it could go a long way.
Yeah, I had the opportunity to sit in on an organizing meeting for one of the UK groups yesterday, and it's one of those things where you can see just by hanging out in this meeting how little tiny actions make a difference, and how they've been able to get more and more people in the UK, especially in the London area, on board with what they're doing. Um, by something as simple as them reaching out to a member of parliament, or making a sign, or as they kept calling it, a placard, uh, and taking it out in public. Um, while we're
And
on,
there was recently some actions, I don't have it queued up, but there were some actions that people did in Germany. I believe it was today, there yesterday, maybe. It was the 22nd there, but basically that people just got together and held a protest in a public area as the world was reopening. So I want
Germany's
to give
been
a
going off, man. Germany, there've been
yeah.
there've been like thousands and thousands of people in the streets, because it's a similar situation as we're experiencing here. Like, there's mass unemployment. There's people who don't, if you're uncertain about the future, you're pretty freaking edgy. Like, that's just you being human. And the entire planet is experiencing uncertainty of future. It's just another way that that we can all relate as people to what Julian Assange has been going through. We've got a guy who's basically been on lockdown for a decade, and in fact couldn't leave his house. Like, we still have a little bit more freedom of movement, but there's this. In Julian's case, there's a death sentence hanging over his head. In the case of ordinary people, there's a severe uncertainty of future and zero confidence whatsoever in our esteemed leaders to do a goddamn thing about it. Trying to see who's yelling at me here.
Yeah, no, I mean, that wraps it up pretty well. But there is actually, so if you could pull it up, it's in news segment, it's Article 2, the Australian Greens senator that calls for Julian's release. I thought this was really cool. I found it scrolling this week, and it's literally just a 1-minute clip of a I don't know if we can actually share video while we're doing it this way. I don't know if the audio will come through right. I'm going to drop that link in the chat for everybody.
It'll be poor. I'll at least pull up the tweet though, so that people can see it. So this is Peter Wish-Wilson. He's a Australian senator. Why isn't Julian Assange being protected and removed from COVID-19 outbreak in Belmarsh prison like other UK prisoners? He's highly vulnerable and being held with no charge. He's an Australian citizen and deserves to be protected. If we can get more and more, sane and semi-sane members of parliament on board with this, that's exactly the kind of movement going forward that that the UK campaigns are looking for, that Ian Rose's group has been instrumental on, that Liz Johnson and Doctors for Assange have been trying to get across. If you're watching right now and you're part of our international audience, don't hesitate to thank the people who are members of parliament who are saying this stuff, and encourage them to keep screaming it, because without a massive generation of noise, we're just kind of talking to ourselves.
And next week, actually, I'm going to include in the actions basically a list of people, of world leaders, of senators around the world, and different authority figures that have spoken out in favor of Julian, different members of government, things like that. But it is super important as people step forward that we give them as much support as possible and highlight this, because this is something that people do on principle, because there's great personal risk for anyone, as everyone knows at this point, that steps forward and speaks up for Julian. So the simple fact that someone in this position, along with the other voices of the Australian Parliament that are doing this, is quite impressive.
No, I agree. And yeah, and again, this is mostly because of public pressure. This is there's only a handful of people in elective office that have been able to maintain any semblance of a conscience in the first place. And a lot of them get squeezed out, like Chris Williamson. There's been a couple of more members of Parliament, of the UK Parliament, who have been squeezed out for standing up for what happened to Chris Williamson. And they're even though the labor leaks have dropped, and we spent a significant amount of time going through the labor leaks, even though it's clear that there's a for lack of a better word, a plot to get rid of more of the left-leaning members of the UK Labour Party by smearing them as anti-Semites. Even though this is public knowledge, it's still working because the public that knows is extremely marginalized because they're not repeating talking points from the BBC. They're not repeating talking points from MSNBC or fucking CNN, you know?
And it's impressive. Like, honestly, as simple as it may seem to have someone say, hey, I support Julian, for someone in that position to make that decision doesn't come easy. So I don't think there's, aside from Tulsi Gabbard, a single member of the U.S. House or Senate that's even stepped forward beyond Tulsi to say, I support Julian Assange. To my knowledge, I may be wrong on that, but
no, there's an almost uniformity at which Congress's knees hit the floor when it's time for the national security state to like loosen their belt. You know, it's pretty pretty disgusting. But then again, you couldn't get to be in the halls of empire if you weren't playing ball. It has been a consistent point that we've tried to make all throughout the presidential campaign. It's a point that I try to make on my show all the time. You can't put good people, let alone the type of people that typically run for office, into a system that's designed by sociopaths to benefit the wealthiest Americans and expect anything other than sociopathic legislation written on behalf of the 0.01%. That's politics. That's politics in a Five Eyes country. So the only way that we can get around that is through mobilization efforts and bringing news, bringing education, bringing the truth in general directly to people. That's why they call it direct action.
Yeah.
I'm spitballing here.
So to piggyback off that, be you, the viewer, be the one person in your community that is the voice for WikiLeaks in your community. It's something we've advocated for since the very beginning of this, the idea of decentralized activism, like being willing to be the one and or two people in an area that are doing it. And there's wonderful examples all across the world at this point of people making a difference as that one person. There was we interviewed her recently. There was, I believe it's Philippa, just a city councilwoman that
Philippa H.
Yeah, just Beach. Basically a city councilwoman in Australia that managed to get the issue of WikiLeaks and Chelsea Manning and Julian Assange put forward there for World Press Freedom Day. So even something as simple as that goes a long way to educate people.
And when we talked to Ian Rose right afterwards, he made the point of saying, like, yeah, she's not my deputy mayor, she's not my specific councilwoman, but we live close enough to where I can meet with her, and she's getting educated on this issue by somebody like Ian who really knows what's going on. While we're in a period of lockdown, we actually have a little bit more access to our elected representatives than we normally would. It's a little bit less insular because they're not stuck in meetings all day. They're not stuck in a literal hall of power like a city hall building. You can get to bored ass people who are just on social media trying to get their points across in a way that's a little bit I don't know, less obfuscated than it normally is. So scream at these guys. I mean, it's, short of being an asshole or being threatening, and I said there's a lot of people in the chat who, of course, we recognize, And I see the work that you do, and I love the work that you do, and I commend you for that. I hope that as we get closer to the second round of hearings, um, more people get on board and more people get loud. There's a 3.5 month window of time for us to get asses in the streets. We've been speaking to a number of organizers around the U.S. And we are expecting a very pleasant turnout in DC this fall. And we'd love to see you guys there. If not, get at us and we can help you with direct actions that are being held in coordination with the events that we're doing in DC. These can proliferate to other major US cities. Let's do that. Please, let's
And
do that.
that's arguably more important than coming to DC in and of itself. If you can be one of the sister events around the country, that would be awesome too. So if you are someone who is still worried about traveling or just flat out doesn't like to, plan something in your city, even if it's just you and a small group of 1 to 5 other people. But do we want to move? I want to just take a minute real quick, actually. Could you pull up the Bean graphics? Because he just released these recently. They just released these. So I just wanted to show them off to everyone because it's a really good way to get people caught up on Julian's trial and talking about and basically showing them, hey, this is what has happened for the 400 plus days that he's been in jail so far. Yeah, so this one here, this one goes over the arrests, the charges, and the actual U.S. spying on him. So it goes over the 17 different counts under the Espionage Act. I believe it goes over the conspiracy to commit computer intrusion, how the UK just yanked him out of the embassy, how Ecuador illegally breached asylum, as well as the US spying and plots to kill him within the embassy itself. And then the other two are basically just as impactful and just as informative. Yeah, so tortured, imprisoned, abused. Just breaking down what's happened so far since he's been taken into Belmarsh prison. And this one goes over what he's actually facing inside the prison itself. I believe this is the one that goes over, yeah, as well about the judge's links to the military, the intelligence community, with Abernath's husband actually being named in the WikiLeaks releases in and of itself, and she being the judge that is overseeing Julian's case.
And look, man, if I mean, these are serious too. These are massive conflicts of interest. The lady Arbuthnot, her husband runs a security firm with the ex-head of MI6. MI6 has been instrumental in the persecution of Julian Assange, as well as getting all of these smears out into media. Like, there is no reason whatsoever that either Lady Arbuthnot or Vanessa Baraster should be allowed anywhere near any courtroom, let alone the one that has Julian Assange in it.
Yeah. And to the point that Baraster, the current judge that's presiding over it's literally reading almost nothing but pre-prepared statements, meeting with the U.S. prosecution in the back of the room, and literally, for the most part, just ignoring anything that the defense puts forward.
Concierge to the
one
U.S.
of the only things that's been approved for the defense is extending the time that Julian will end up being in prison in and of itself. Because we're in the middle of a pandemic and his prison's overrun. They're not allowing access to his attorneys. So, you know, even that is cool.
What I would like to see from Julian's legal team is one, an announcement that they've spoken to him at all in the last 3 months. and then two, like a demand from the legal team to I guess whoever runs magistrates, saying, look, man, we've got evidence on top of evidence on top of evidence, just showing not just a conflict of interest, but a clear bias from everyone wearing a robe involved in this. If not for the benefit of giving a new slate of magistrates, at least for the benefit of the actual public becoming aware of this, because we're here in a different category of activists, as activists, where, you know, this is the information that we digest on a daily basis because it helps formulate what we do in our activism. I was just at our grocery store before I came over here to do the show today, buying massive quantities of migraine medicine over the counter because I don't have health insurance. And I ran into a friend who knows that I have a show, knows that I went to DC, but was like, so why do you do this? Why Julian Assange? And I got to stand out there in the parking lot for like 15 or 20 minutes, explaining not just to him, but to a handful of other people that kind of came up what was going on, like basically street preaching from the bed of my truck as to why people need to be on board with this. And I saw some people like nodding their heads, like they got it, like they really were really starting to get it. And it just underscores the point that when you make the conversation post-partisan, when you boil it down to whether or not we as people have the right to information that hasn't been spun and hasn't been sanitized or redacted from our eyesight, that needs to happen before we can have a conversation about anything else.
And let's not forget how small that window is now, where you have the National Counterintelligence Document for 2020 through 2022, as Burmis points out constantly, literally says that public disclosure organizations are now the same as Al-Qaeda. So people that give you accurate news and information are viewed as the same level as actual terrorists.
Hacktivists, leaktivists, and public disclosure outlets. If that's the case, what does that tell you about what you see on the television or what you see on 95% of independent media? If they're not scared, if they're not screaming their heads off about this, if they're not showing you, like Jason Burmis does, that NDAA at least once a week, saying, look, this is how we've been classified, what does our future look like, then they're not telling you the news. They're not giving you information that is in any way outside of that left-right, let's make these guys fight bubble. So keep that in mind when you're watching people. Keep that in mind when you're talking to your friends who consume independent media. Like, ask them, have they mentioned that hacktivists, leaktivists, and public disclosure outlets are classified as terrorists? If your favorite indie content creator hasn't done that, maybe they're not concerned about their future. Maybe they're not doing anything other than confirming your biases. And then you need to ask yourself if that's what you want out of media, is bias confirmation, or to be challenged and to go and learn shit, grow as a human being. I mean, maybe it's just me. I don't know.
So I think it's about time to take a swing at Mike Pompeo again, just because that's so enjoyable. If you could get that article pulled up, there's new information here that actually came out. We covered this on Tuesday. Mike Pompeo, the person investigating Mike Pompeo, I believe his name's Linnick. Not speaking to whether he's a good or bad person in general, but he was investigating Mike Pompeo.
Of the
And
American.
it came out recently that, and we'll get into it here, but this guy was investigating a donor dinner that was held for Pompeo, which I don't know why Mike Pompeo needs donors, but so do you want to read through this
Yeah,
real quick?
let's jump into that here real quick. While Democrats are investigating whether State Department Inspector General Steve Linick was fired for probing into last year's expedited $8 billion arms sale to Saudi Arabia, the American Conservative has learned of another more direct reason for the IG's abrupt firing. Just days before Linick was removed, he sent a request for information about the donor dinners, otherwise known as the Madison dinners, that Pompeo has been hosting on taxpayer dime for corporate and media bigwigs. Before coronavirus canceled them, the Madison dinners were elaborate, unpublicized state dinners that Pompeo and his wife, Susan, which, again, perfect name for next level Karen, hosted in diplomatic reception rooms beginning in 2018. A bevy of bigwig political donors, corporate CEOs, and conservative news media celebrities were invited to the dinners funded by the taxpayers. As to whether these dinners were Hatch Act violations, it would fall into a legal gray area, but using taxpayer money to fund essentially a lavish donor dinner made people in the office for protocol feel very uncomfortable, a former State Department official told the American Conservative. The Office of Protocol exists to host state dinners and events for head of states, monarchs, diplomats, and other U.S. officials in order to advance the work of diplomacy. It's hard to argue that State Department business is taking place when the attendees are almost all American CEOs and media figures. The master list obtained by NBC includes the names of nearly 500 invitees and specifics who accepted, although it's possible some people responded but didn't show. The invitees are a who's who list of big donors as well as media that he wants to look good in front of. A former high-level State Department employee that is acknowledged, that has knowledge of the list, told the American Conservative. Pompeo would invite one ambassador from some country or another, so that way the dinner would technically qualify as a state function. This is all with an eye to the presidential election in 2024. Another State Department source said, noting that a 2024 presidential run would put Pompeo at odds with Vice President Mike Pence. Hold up, man. I'll come back to this article, but just for a moment here, it sounds like the American Conservative is saying Mike Pompeo is using these State Department dinners as an early way to kick off his 2024 campaign run.
Well, let's also think too about the things that Mike Pompeo has said and the things that Mike Pompeo does, right? So Mike Pompeo is staunchly against WikiLeaks. He is the person that named them a hostile non-state intelligence actor, right? So we're at basically the pinnacle of the trial of free speech. Julian Assange has been tortured now for a decade. He's been held in solitary confinement in Belmarsh prison, essentially solitary confinement for over a year now. You have a mass expansion of the global security state. You have mass surveillance rolling out with Palantir at the head of it. All the while, Mike Pompeo is trying to court and fund and befriend all of these State Department officials. So I think saying that it's for a 2024 presidential run is giving Mike Pompeo too much credit, because I think it's just him trying to control the media for what they're talking about now in 2020, not anything to do with 2024 necessarily.
That's interesting. I mean, it seems like the mainstream media is all but tripping over themselves to comply with what Mike Pompeo says, or to fucking take what Mike Pompeo says as gospel and then just repeat it uncritically. If he was just inviting heads of state or diplomats, that would be one thing. But if the list is made up of mostly, business executives and the media, yes, it's a way to get them to be more compliant. but it's also a way to set whatever your agenda is and have it uncritically reported. And whether or not that's for a run for president, we'll see. But Mike Pompeo has already risen from the ranks from, a really, really awful Kansas representative to running the CIA, to running the State Department. That's almost the same trajectory that Hillary Clinton did, where she got a Senate seat given to her and then she was handed the State Department and proceeded to go on a killing spree, much like the one that Pompeo's been doing since he's had the job. And the next logical step for her was to get her ass handed to her in one of the most easily winnable elections on the face of God's gray earth. Mike Pompeo probably has a better chance of becoming president simply because whoever the Democrats rig a primary for is going to be one of the most unlikable people on the freaking face of the planet.
If we have a president Pompeo, it's basically over at that point.
How do we not already? How did you explain how the 12 years that George Bush was president was any different than Mike Pompeo being president? George Bush literally walked from the directorship of the CIA into Reagan's White House. Reagan, Alzheimer puppet, giving George Bush and his, I don't want to use the word cabal because it sounds too Q-y, but George Bush and his confederation of megalomaniacal sociopaths, which became the Project for a New American Century, gave them free reign of the country for at least that 12 years, if not to this fucking day, because those demons are still running the show. Bill Barr, George H.W. Bush's attorney general, is Donald Trump's attorney general. Elliot Abrams, George Bush's destabilization guy in Latin America, is Donald Trump's destabilization guy in Latin America. General McChrystal is still running things behind the scenes with all of his packs. Like they're
doing a terrible job.
Yeah, and the continuity of government exists. The continuity of government that they talk about in all of the pandemic event scenarios, from Dark Winter to Crimson Contagion and Event 201, that's occurred, quote unquote, legislatively. We had George H.W. Bush losing to his cousin Bill Clinton, who then transferred the halls of power to George H.W. Bush's son, who then transferred them to Barack Obama, who is fascinatingly also related to George H.W. Bush and George Bush and Bill Clinton. And they handed that to a freaking orange monkey from the WWE who is there to distract and confuse the masses while the same people run the show.
So we had a question in the chat from Heathcliff, and it was, how much time does Julian currently get out of his cell daily? 30 minutes. 30 minutes.
He's locked down 23 and a half hours a day, Heathcliff. The 30 minutes he does get out, he goes to a prison yard where he walks a square concrete block. In the US, maybe it has a basketball hoop in it without a net, maybe it doesn't. But that's it. You walk a square for 30 minutes and then you get sent back in. And it doesn't matter what the weather is, that's your out time. So that's it. Unless he's
And that's also your time to talk to your attorney. That's your time to make your phone call. That limited amount of time is your time to do everything outside of your cell that day. It's essentially, if you watched our breakdown of it a couple weeks ago, Julian's basically under special administrative measures in the UK without it being given that name.
There's a conversation about Karens in my chat going on right now, and I need to make this perfectly clear. Karen in my chat, you're not the Karen that we're talking about when we use the term Karen. I thought we've been over this. I did. I like there's a particular kind of person who's called a Karen, and I think the male version of that is a Carl, but with a K. I'm not entirely sure. Like I things come into my periphery, but that ain't you. There's a whole chart. Like they've graphed this out. I'll have to find it and put it up in the Slow News Day show one of these days. But like you start out a Becky, and you transition to a Karen, and after you hit 45, then you're a Susan, and then after that you're like a Dolores or something, a Martha. I'm not even sure. But basically, it means you're the type of comfortable white woman who calls the cops on teenagers or people of color for existing. Maybe I have that wrong. I don't know.
Do you want to talk about the Pamela Anderson article real quick? Because I think we only got 2 left. We have Pamela and Craig Murray.
By the way, I totally do think that you should be able to put the Karen label onto gentlemen, especially if they're the type of people that will call the cops on some teenagers for having a barbecue. Oh, this is the Daily Mail. God damn it.
Yeah, I know.
Give me 85 minutes to close all these ads. Are you kidding me? Yeah, dude. This is
Do you want to just read it? I don't think we necessarily need to pull this one up.
Trying to crash my entire laptop. Good Lord.
I'll start going through it as you're trying to get it up, though. So the title, He Could Possibly Die in Prison. Pamela Anderson claims WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange is very sick and he should be let out. So before we even get into this, I just want to point people to remember that for the last 3, I believe, maybe 4 court hearings, Julian has not been able to attend for reasons cited as he is unwell. So as we're going into this, just keep that fact in the back of your mind throughout the rest of this. The Baywatch star 52 has claimed WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange is very sick and could die in prison. Pamela also said Julian Assange should be let out due to the COVID-19 pandemic and that he is in a dire position. The WikiLeaks founder is wanted in the U.S. for allegedly conspiring with an Army intelligence analyst, Chelsea Manning, to expose military secrets a decade ago. The U.S. grand jury has indicted Julian Assange on 18 charges, 17 of which fall under the Espionage Act. The charges may carry a total of 175 years of imprisonment. Early this month, Julian Assange's extradition case was postponed, and the hearing is set to resume September 7th. So this is based on a larger interview that Pamela did. I'll try to find the link to that longer interview and post it, but this is basically just a little write-up of what this was actually about. So the WikiLeaks founder is wanted in the U.S. for allegedly conspiring with an intelligence analyst, Chelsea Manning, to expose the U.S. military secrets a decade ago. War crimes are not secrets, I guess, to provide a little editorial note here, and there'll probably be a couple more throughout all of this. But to continue, Pamela said, I was the first person to visit him in Belmarsh prison, and he is still there, and he is very sick. They're letting a lot of prisoners out because of the COVID situation. They should be letting him out. He's in a dire position. He could possibly die in prison. I hope not. She added, I just wish him the best, but I haven't. I haven't been in contact with people around him, and no. He knew that he would, and he knew he was getting into. He sacrificed a lot to give us true information. He is a hero to me. I just hope people feel the same way. Earlier this month, Assange's extradition case was postponed and is likely to resume on September 7th. It's going to take some negotiation to find the Crown Court that is open in September. In the current climate, willing and available to take this hearing. Judge Brewster said in the Westminster Court in one of the recent hearings. The new location might be outside London. A start date for the remaining 3 weeks of the hearing will be confirmed in due course. So I believe that is most of that in there.
Yeah, the rest of it just kind of delves into Pamela Anderson gossip.
Yeah.
So what's interesting about them saying they're not sure where they're going to hold this trial is I think that has more to do with the successful protests that took place outside in February. There were a ton of people in London showing up to speak on behalf of Julian Assange. And I think I think this has more to do with discouraging that presence than it does with any inability with inside the UK court system to find an acceptable venue. But I'm also slightly conspiratorial by nature.
Yeah, I think it's part of just the larger power game, having the ability to just change things like that and make the defense have to scramble and make everyone have to rearrange where protests are going to happen and make it so that way they can have a billion bans like they were doing before. So that way they don't even if Julian shows up in person, the chances of people seeing him are very, very small.
Well, and we saw during the last case management hearing where there were a handful of protesters outside Westminster, like they've been every single time there's a case management hearing, they were practicing safe social distancing like their government told them to, and they were still dispersed by a special branch of UK police who couldn't tell the people who had assembled what law they were breaking, what protocol they were violating. They just had to go. And when they didn't, they tried another tactic, saying, oh, you can go inside the court and you can watch, trying to get them all to do that and then get hung up trying, arguing with people inside the court as to whether or not they had the right to do it. But there was a police officer going around to different people who had assembled who was trying that exact tactic, being like, you can just go inside, you don't even have to be standing out right here. And all of their signs were trying to get people to honk as they were driving by in support of Julian. So it's just really bad sleight of hand on the part of the UK police.
And the police officers weren't wearing masks. How terrible of them. I don't know if you look up the pictures, Tarika Dodd's article shows it, but literally none of the officers are wearing masks while they're trying to.
They never are. They never are. I can't remember if it was the beginning of this week or if it was last week, but there were several law enforcement attacks on people who had assembled the yellow vests in France. Were getting the crap beat out of them by French police who weren't wearing gloves or masks. There was another protest in the UK where they like straight up de-pantsed a guy and then freaking carted him off, threw him into the back of a police van. Nobody involved was wearing any sort of PPE gear. If that's not tipping you off, I don't know what it's gonna take. I don't. The people who are supposedly there to enforce these protocols, because they're not laws, nobody's written any sort of legislation on how you're supposed to dress when you go outside. Why should you be arrested for doing something that's supposedly illegal when there's nothing to say that it's illegal? It's just,
and every single case in the UK that went to trial about these bullshit laws has been thrown out. I don't think every case has gone yet to trial for a potential withdrawal, but everyone that has didn't stick. That was something that I think we covered it on Tuesday, actually, that the UK, with their own coronavirus laws, has no idea what the fuck they're doing while enforcing their own laws. And everyone that's been charged with them that has gone to trial has been released.
Well,
without charge.
look at who's in charge of the response in the U.S. and in the UK. It's Niall Ferguson, who's been wrong about every disease that he's ever put forth a white paper on. It's Bill Gates, and it's Peter Thiel.
What could possibly go wrong? Like that
I
sounds like a
just
great
found
combination
out.
of upstanding gentlemen, Steve.
I just found out last week that my governor, Gavin Newsom, is using Niall Ferguson's Imperial College model for how he handles California's rollout into a post-pandemic police state. That I mean, who's wrong about shit all the time besides Niall Ferguson? Like, who's an example that we can point to of someone who's just been historically categorically wrong? Like every time they open them, Rachel Maddow. Niall Ferguson is the Rachel Maddow of health scenarios, you know, of the outcome of pandemics. Like historically never has he gotten anywhere near the target when he's put out the reports on how people should handle this. And yet we've got the entirety of the United Kingdom and at least the fifth largest economy in the world in the state of California following this model. So you have to ask yourself who benefits when these models are followed. And it's not me and it's not you. It's a very small group of the predator class. The reason that you see a lot of these protests, which are agreeably astroturfed, where people are demanding to, you know, go back to work or to get a haircut or to go golfing or whatever it is, you have to bear in mind that a lot of the people who do come out are also small business owners or work for a company with anywhere from like 2 to 15 people who aren't part of this mega corporate structure that is setting up these protests, and they're assed out, like completely assed out. You know, you pour your whole livelihood into a business that hires 8 people, and something like this happens. They shut down all of the small businesses, but they keep the giant big box stores open.
Mm-hmm.
They shut down your ability, like in Michigan, like where they were walling off seeds. No, you can't get anything from the garden section at freaking Lowe's or Walmart, you know, but we'll sell you imported vegetables that have had all of the nutrients bleached out of them.
And then people want to insult those people for storming the Capitol building, demanding that they have the right to fucking grow plants and visit their family on the other side of town. And they're turned into somehow like, oh, demon bastardization, where they are as equal in what they're fighting for as the people who work for the multinational corporations seeking better representation, wages, and compensation for working for those multinational corporations. So I really hope that people in the general strike and Corona strike movement can understand that the shutting down of small businesses is a direct assault against the working class and the middle class and the working poor, even if the people fighting to reopen it don't inherently understand the larger class struggle that they exist within.
Yeah, I think the aim of the Corona strike is to be an organizational hub for people who are, you know, advocating general strikes, for people who are advocating like a specific targeted, you know, rent strike or utilities or whatever it is. And they're while the Corona strike organizers themselves are like, no, stay the fuck home, don't go out. What they're getting at is, if you are going to go out, do it because you are legitimately protesting something. Do it because your sign says, we want worker rights. We want a livable wage. We want to not have to give 3/4 of our income to pay our rent. Instead of, man, I wish I was golfing right now. Which is a pretty fair ask. It is. There was a question in my chat about has the ACLU stepped in? No.
They've stepped in some, but not much. It's kind of like Amnesty International, where they did the basics and put it on their website and then went and did other stuff.
They're about as effective as tits on a bull. They really are. It's performance art at this point. It's been brought to my attention a number of times that Amnesty International has never labeled Julian Assange or Chelsea Manning as a prisoner of conscience. Their support has been tepid at best, regardless of the wealth of information available to them. The only thing I have to say positive about it is that there's a particular class of citizen who thinks that these are honorable institutions, the ACLU and Amnesty International, and if they're saying something that appears positive about Julian Assange or about these strikes or about Chelsea Manning, then if that takes them to a point to where they start doing more research, great, but you're never going to get more than the bare minimum out of them.
So someone that is doing great work, gentleman by the name of Craig Murray, you may or may not remember him from the Man in the Glass Box article. He is a writer out of the UK. I think he's Scottish. I could be wrong, and I apologize if I am.
Craig Murray's Scottish.
Yeah, but he was recently served a subpoena. We talked about this a while ago, and we're just kind of following up on it, for journalism. He was literally reporting on a case unrelated to Julian's, and they are subpoenaing him. In the original subpoena, they referenced his work about Julian Assange to talk about how, basically, to frame his work as a journalist, essentially. So this is just a follow-up article about what's happened so far and where he's at with it.
Craig says, well, it's really happening. It's something of a shock to see yourself listed as a criminal for writing the truth. I have a tiny extra glimpse now into the way my friend Julian has been feeling. 3 appeal court judges, even at the procedural hearing, though not unheard of, that is not normal. The state is sparing no resources on this. In a sense, I'm flattered. This is the actual document. There will be no jury at the eventual trial, and this worries me, not least because the indictment, called a petition, contains within itself evidence that this process is a stitch-up. Please help me here. Read paragraphs 49 to 56 of the indictment after reading this explanation. Paragraph 49 of the indictment is in an utter garble. So is that sentence, Mr. Murray. It states that I sent a Twitter message beginning, "It is respectfully submitted." I sent no such message. Paragraph 50 is missing. This is not a misnumbering. Paragraph 50 really is missing. I assume my Twitter message intended to be quoted at paragraph 49, and whatever led in to the Crown's argument beginning, "It is respectively submitted," were in the missing section. So we can see it right here. There, paragraph 49, paragraph 51. At paragraph 53, the same thing happens again. It explicitly states that I published another tweet starting, "It is respectfully submitted that." I published no such tweet. Again, the indictment does not give the actual text of the tweet complained of, even though it claims to do so. This time, 2 paragraphs are clearly missing. And again, this is not just a misnumbering because of the missing material. It jumps from 53 to 56. You can see it right here in front of you on the screen. In short, the indictment from paragraphs 49 to 56 is an inoperable jumble with 3 paragraphs missing from 2 different locations, and which does not even contain, though it states it does, the very tweets which form part of the alleged offense with which I am charged. You may argue this does not matter and clerical errors are easily corrected, but that is to miss the point. I used to prepare official documents in my 20-year diplomatic career, from ministerial replies to members of the public to fully fledged international treaties. A diplomatic note to a foreign government, which has a legal status, might be the best comparator from my work to this indictment or petition. I always scrupulously proofread everyone I send before signing. It is unthinkable that a diplomatic note would be sent containing not one, but a series of major material errors. Let's skip down here just a little bit.
And I just want to point out real quick that Craig Murray's a badass. Like, the fact that he's sitting here breaking this down, just talking shit about the people prosecuting him is, I don't know, it just makes me like him even more.
Yeah, no, I mean, he's doing it in a very, like, high-mannered way, which has got to sting for the powers that be, because he knows how to speak their language. So good on him. But one thing is abundantly clear: neither Alex Prentice nor Lord Turnbull can have carefully read through the document before they signed it. I don't believe for one moment that they would knowingly sign off a document containing such major errors. The judge, in particular, is meant to weigh carefully the matter to see if there really is a case to answer before he signs the Crown's petition. But I say it again, plainly, Lord Turnbull has not actually read through it, or he never would have signed this garbled mess. I'm advised that it may be contempt of court for me to point out that Lord Turnbull signed this without reading it, but when a law makes it illegal to point out a blindingly obvious fact, then the law is an ass. If Lord Turnbull does not wish to be criticized, he should try doing his job properly and actually paying attention to what he signs. Contempt is the right word. I have a great deal of contempt for anybody who would send me such a portentous legal document rotten through with utterly careless error, which would have been spotted by even a cursory reading of the document. They did not read it. The judge who approved it did not read it. Neither of them bothered to read the indictment or petition because it had already been decided to, quote, get Craig Murray. And therefore, it did not matter what the document actually said. The content of the charges is immaterial to them. Otherwise, they would have read them before signing. There can only be two reasons for that failure. The first is incompetence. The second is corruption. In a sense, it does not matter which it is in this case. A state which is turning to authoritarianism to crush dissent does not need to be very careful about matters of process. I'm going to read that one more time because I think that it's something that we can get out. I think that that's a message that can resonate. A state which is turning to authoritarianism to crush dissent does not need to be very careful about matters of process. This prosecution
like, if you want to have a conversation about Karens.
No offense, Karen.
Right. No, but Craig Murray fucking lays that out absolutely beautifully. And the fact that he's literally telling the judge, like, you don't know how to do your fucking job, but politely as fuck and even more insultingly, nonetheless, I think it speaks well of his character. And the way that he frames it and points out there at the end, process doesn't matter. That's the punishment.
Yeah.
Because when you get dragged into something and they did it wrong, that just makes it take longer.
He says the failure of both Prentice and Turnbull to read before signing is not important for the mistakes in the document, which can be remedied by a new document. It's important because of the clear indication of attitude. This prosecution is an abuse of process, a clear Article 6 violation under the European Convention on Human Rights. A series of facts make this abundantly plain. The abuse of process lies in this, combined with the extraordinary selectivity in prosecuting me when others who can be objectively proven to have much more efficiently produced, quote, jigsaw identification are not prosecuted. There's a very clear political motivation behind the selection of who to prosecute and who not to prosecute. When you put together the facts that there is overwhelming evidence that mainstream media journalists were more guilty of jigsaw identification than I, that systematic police action is being taken to harass only supporters of Alex Salmon, and that they don't even care what the indictment to be used against me actually says, the overall picture becomes very clear. Authoritarianism doesn't have to worry about mistakes in the indictment because it can just smash you in the face with the jackboot. That's what's happening here. Let's see. Why could the state be so keen to prosecute Craig Murray? That is, doesn't even care what is in the indictment, or even if it is drawn up with the most basic level of competence. I refer you to this excellent letter setting out the fact that the state is only acting against those who defend the innocent Alex Salmon, even though his detractors were much more in contempt of court. I refer you to the panel-based opinion poll, which showed that very substantially more people who know the identities of the accusers learned them from the mainstream media.
And this, hold on real quick, just so jigsawing for people who don't know, because it's a like weird UK term, is when you lay out little points of evidence, not naming someone, but pointing someone in the direction of another individual that shouldn't be named in a court proceeding. And I just want to point out how protections like that get used in a politicized manner to target dissidents, which is why government shouldn't have the ability to regulate that type of reporting in the first place.
No, you're right. The article closes with 2 ways you can help. The hearing on June 10th is supposed to be public, but it will be virtual because of coronavirus. While it is a case management hearing, I shall nevertheless be grateful if you are able to attend virtually, as I am very keen indeed that I'm not stitched up out of the public eye. Please send an email requesting access to the virtual hearing on 10th June to judicialcomms with 2 M's at scottcourts.gov.uk. I can throw that in the chat. I'm very keen, as many people do this as possible. Journalists, please, in addition, copy and the website for accreditation. Secondly, many people come to this blog through social media, and I am currently suffering a very high level of suppression on Facebook and especially on Twitter. And that's true, man. Like, I used to see Craig Murray's tweets pop up all the time on my newsfeed. I haven't seen a single one in weeks. Rather than just retweet and share any social media posts that brought you here, which may appear on face to have worked, but the dissemination will be suppressed, I would be very grateful if you could also write your own new posting and put a link. If you have your own blog or access to one, a commendation of this post with a link would be very welcome, even if it is not your normal policy. And finally, of course, the entire post is free to copy, republish, and translate as you wish. Unlike our adversaries, including the Integrity Initiative, the 77th Brigade, Bellingcat, the Atlantic Council, and hundreds of other warmongering propaganda operations, this blog has no source of state, corporate, or institutional finance whatsoever. It runs entirely on voluntary subscriptions from its readers, many of whom do not necessarily agree with every article, but welcome the alternative voice, insider information, and debates. So, yeah, I mean, we're obviously pretty partial to having Craig Murray around. He's one of those people who his reporting in February from inside Julian's courtroom was man, it was fantastic. It was written with an understanding that only someone who has achieved the level of institutional respectability that Murray had as a diplomat can carry. It's one, the humor involved in it, even though it's a little bit drier than most, was just tone perfect. Like Craig Murray is a presence that we need around. And just because we're focused on what's happening to Julian Assange doesn't mean that we can't take some time to support people like Murray. While we were in DC, we went and supported the 4 embassy protectors who got hauled out after a 27-day long siege at the Ecuador, or at the Venezuelan embassy. Went and sat in on that court hearing. Were able to talk to him outside after the fact. And you saw the end result of that just a couple of weeks ago when Kevin Zeese was on the Vigil. Popular Resistance will be supporting Action for Assange again in our demonstrations coming up in September. I'm going to go ahead and put the GoFundMe on the screen one more time, because I can't stress this enough. Like we're trying to hold 3 weeks worth of actions and events in Washington, D.C. We've got, what, 107 days? 108? Andrew?
Yeah, 107 days until the next round of Julian's trial. September 7th is the next start date.
Not an extreme amount of time, but definitely enough to where we can meet our goal. So please, yeah, if you can, like what it really doesn't, like $3, $5, $8, $10, $12, like it all adds up. It does. We would love to see a couple of big donors like we had last time, or recurring donors like we had last time, but this is an entirely different situation that we're in now.
And I'm going to put a link to our Discord in the Action for Assange and Slow News Day chats. If you're interested in organizing with us, or if you just need a community of people to talk to, please feel free to hop on and chat with us. We do organizing meetings every Monday currently, but that's going to be expanding the closer and closer we get and the more allies we get on board. If you're interested in helping out or in being the action in your community, please hop on the Discord and talk with us. But I think that's it for us for today. Do you have anything else, Steve?
No.
Cool. Well, I would like to thank everybody for joining in with us, talking to us today. You can find me on Twitter at Andrew Zigman. You can find us on Twitter at action_4Assange or at action4assange.com.
My name's Steve Poikinen. I host a show called Slow News Day. You can find it on YouTube by typing Slow News Day Podcast into the search bar. I am also on the Rockfin. I recommend going and signing up for that Rockfin account. If you choose to endorse me and sign up for $10 a month, that gets you access to the premium content of all of Rockfin. Some fantastic creators over there. Jason Burmis, Last American Vagabond. We're starting to hear rumors that one Jimmy Dore might be coming over to Rockfin, and that would be wonderful. It would at least expand the platform greatly. So check that out over there. I think, yeah, that's about it. Ray McGovern, Uncle Santa, will be my guest tomorrow on Slow News Day at 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific. Please tune in for that. That will be great. And until next time, we love you guys very, very much, and we're stoked that you choose to come be a part of this with us. We will see you Tuesday, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central, and until then, good luck to us all.